Okay, we are finishing up this week the books of Peter in our New Testament Bible reading, the last two chapters of First Peter and the whole of Second Peter. And so let's jump in and talk about both of these books. And First Peter, you remember, is a lot about suffering, the suffering that God's people will experience in this world because we are exiles and strangers, pilgrims, those that don't belong. And so there's this important principle in First Peter chapter 4 where on one hand Peter says those around you will be surprised when you don't run with them in the same excesses of dissipation. The world expects people to conform, looks weirdly at those that are strange and odd and different. And so Peter says that will be you. And so they will treat you in a certain way because of that. But you shouldn't be surprised when this difference is made known, and especially when the fiery trial comes upon you and people are persecuting you or ridiculing you or ostracizing you from society. He says you should expect that. And so instead of being thrown off by this suffering or this trial, the persecution, God's people should respond in all the ways that Peter has been talking about in this letter. Going back to chapter 3, some of the things that we didn't mention last week, but being a blessing to the world when the world is trying to curse us, being ready to give a defense for the reason, the hope that is in us. Like Noah, different than the world, saved through the waters of baptism, we should recognize that we are called out of the world in that sense. And in 1 Peter 4, he talks about rallying together to serve one another and to support one another. In chapter 5, he talks about not only depending on the leaders, the elders in the church and submitting to them, but ultimately, of course, submitting to God, humbling ourselves before him, and resisting the pressures put on us and the temptations by the devil, the evil one, who is using this tribulation to try to lead us astray. So that's 1 Peter, a book about suffering. And 2 Peter is a book that is largely about teaching, but has a similar sort of theme of the difference that we have in the world. And so Peter reminds his readers about the message that he gave to them as an eyewitness. Peter is about to die, he says in 2 Peter, and so he's reminding these people of things they already know. The message of salvation they've received, the pathway of growth that they have, that they can grow in their knowledge and self-control and love and all these things in order to make sure that their calling and election is sure. Peter is urging them to continue in the faith, and particularly in the face of another kind of trial, which is that of false teachers. And so Peter is warning about the false teaching that can come into the church, and so he goes back and he traces all these examples from the Old Testament of those that were trying to lead other people astray, and how God brought his judgment upon them. And in the midst of that, how those who were faithful were upheld by God and strengthened by him and saved in the end when those who were false and deceptive were brought down. And so Peter says the same fate will come upon the false teachers for his readers, and they need to be aware of that and not join them and not be led astray by them. And in particular, maybe one of the things that they are saying is that God is not going to fulfill this promise. This idea that Jesus is coming back, I mean, it's been years and years, and imagine how much more that case could be made today. People say, Jesus isn't coming back, all that was just, hype or something. And Peter says, no, God's judgment is coming. Jesus will return, and the present order will be undone, and there will be a new heavens and a new earth in which righteousness dwells. And so this powerful statement at the end of 2 Peter, if all these things are going to be dissolved and something new is going to be created by God, then what manner of persons ought we to be living in this time and place, knowing that God's judgment and salvation in Christ is right around the corner. A day is coming when all those who are false will be revealed and will be destroyed. A day is coming when those trials, those persecutions will be defeated and overcome and removed forever. And a day when God's people who have been exiles and strangers will be home with him forever. That hope And that sober warning of judgment should motivate and guide God's people in the living of the rest of their days. That's the message of Peter. And check back in next week as we continue through the rest of our New Testament. Thank you.